Today, we're going to be talking about Vergil Ortiz versus Maurice Hooker. We're going to talk about stats, then we're going to talk about game plan, and then we will have a prediction at the end. So with that said, let's get into the video. Okay, so looking at these guys side by side when it comes to stats, Ortiz is 22, Hooker is 31. When it comes to height, there's a little bit of difference here, and that's for Maurice has that 1 inch advantage. But the biggest thing to note between these guys is a 10-inch reach advantage for Maurice Hooker. That is huge. That is a monster reach advantage. Looking at their general records, Hooker has 3 draws and 1 loss, which was to Jose Ramirez. And when you look at Vergil Ortiz, he has a perfect record and perfect KO percentage. I know they haven't been against the most competitive fighters, but still pretty impressive record. Let's talk about game plan. Let's start with Hooker. Okay, so Maurice Hooker, the pros for him, what I like about him as a fighter in this fight, number one being that 10-inch reach advantage is massive. So if he's got to utilize that jab, he's got to utilize that straight right hand of his and make sure to fight this fight at distances that he feels comfortable with, but he can also be effective at making sure not to overextend that right hand and put himself off balance. That's going to be key for him. The other thing though about Maurice Hooker that makes him not just a guy that uses his reach and just jab the entire time is that he has really good timing overall. I noticed he was able to time Ramirez very well. And he does that oftentimes with his lead left hand with a check left hook to the body as well as upstairs. Really nice combinations there. He's not just a one-trick pony, and that's what allows him to be a little bit more dynamic as a fighter overall. The cons for him overall, though, is that he basically hasn't had a real fight since the Ramirez one. His last one was in December, and it wasn't even a full round. So he basically has the same amount of layoff time as Vergil Ortiz, which is not great, especially when you're older. The other thing I would say in terms of cons for Hooker in coming into this fight, his head movement. It's non-existent. He just doesn't have great head movement. He's very straight up, and he just doesn't utilize it at all. He utilizes his reach mostly to control that distance and as his defense using that timing. So if a guy does get on the inside, it's trouble for him because he's stationary with his head. But then on top of that, now that he's given up the reach advantage, any kind of hook that he would throw, any kind of punch he would throw, it's going to take more time to get to the target because of that long reach. So that's where you'd see Jose Ramirez landing some hooks on the inside once he pushed him up against the ropes, compared to Hooker, who would land these great jabs in terms of timing when they're in the center of the ring. Maurice Hooker needs to stay off the ropes. If he doesn't, that head movement and that extra reach is going to go all the way, and it's going to work against him instead of for him. So now let's talk about Vergil Ortiz. Vergil Ortiz, the big pro for him, he's 22 years old. He's going to be able to come in there, rip roaring, not slow down. He can change the pace at any time he wants. He doesn't have to worry about going the full 12 rounds. I think I'm going to expect him to throw great volume in this fight. The other thing is, even though he has the disadvantage of the 10-inch reach, I think though he has a very powerful jab. If you watch Vergil Ortiz's jab, it is very sharp. It's almost like a weapon for him. It's so punishing. So I love his jab, and he utilizes that to set up various other punches, but also different angles. And that's the next thing I want to talk about with him. His footwork is fantastic. I love this kid's footwork. He moves very, very well. He's very athletic, but he also gets into great rhythms, and I see him changing angles all the time. It's one of my favorite parts about him, and I think if he can do that against Hooker, who is much more flat-footed, that could be a huge advantage for him. We saw how Jose Ramirez, when Jose Ramirez could move and change angles, it was to his benefit, and I want to see him do that as well. Now, the biggest thing for Vergil Ortiz, the secret weapon for him in this, it's Robert Garcia. His trainer was with Jose Ramirez and is with Jose Ramirez and trained Jose Ramirez to beat Hooker. And that allows him to feel comfortable, trust his trainer, especially a young fighter, because the biggest con for a young fighter like Ortiz is that he hasn't been challenged yet. We haven't seen him get pushed. We haven't seen him have to go to that next level because he's always had his way in the fight. So with that, it's a bad thing that he is going into this against a very experienced fighter that has that upper hand on him, but it's a good thing the fact that his corner is going to be someone he can really rely on, trust, and stick to a game plan. I think overall this is where both guys are at, and this is what their game plan is most likely going to look like. So let's get into prediction now. So if I am going into a fight prediction, I want to be honest with you guys, if I have a bias, and in this case I do, and it's Vergil Ortiz. I'm a big fan of him. I really like this kid, and in my opinion, him and Boots are both the future of the welterweight division. These guys are at the top. Spence, Crawford, they're there for right now, but they won't be there for long because Crawford's in his mid-30s, and right now Spence is in his early 30s. Both these guys, we're looking at mid-20s and early 20s. They are the future of the welterweight division, and they have the skills and the power to be very disruptive at this weight class. So my prediction is going to be a 8th round stoppage for Vergil Ortiz. I don't think he's going to get it as quick as Ramirez. Ramirez, I believe, did it in the 6th round, but I think he's going to get the stoppage. And even though Hooker has now come up in weight to 147 instead of being at 140, I just see a guy that doesn't move his head well enough. I just see a guy that's a little bit too flat-footed. I just see a guy that, in my opinion, is a good fighter, but I don't see a special fighter, and I see a special fighter when I see Vergil Ortiz. That's my opinion. Let me know yours down in the comment section below. By the way, we will be live streaming this fight this Saturday, so come on by, have a drink with us, have a good time, talk boxing, and with that said, we'll talk to you later. Thanks.